I'm moving back into my parents' house. I just graduated from college this weekend, and I really miss Terry Pratchett. For this episode, as promised, I read Tehanu by Ursula Le Guin. I actually read this about a month and a half ago, but I'm finally doing a video on it, so I had to kind of look back through it and figure out what the plot was. So, back in the mid to late 1980s, Terry Pratchett gave a talk, which he later turned into an essay called Why Gandalf Never Married. And in this essay, he talked about how wizards are always the arbiters of good magic, and they always have the most powerful magic, and then women's magic is something relegated to evilness and like small-mindedness. And he mentions the Earthsea books by name because back in the 80s, they were, I think, like the first 3. And I believe that Tehanu was written in, if not direct response to that essay, sort of an indirect response, and then Terry Pratchett later wrote Equal Rights, just a few years after he gave that talk, which is about a female wizard and the witches on the Discworld, and I cannot recommend the Witches series enough, but I'll come back to that. So, some of you may not have read Earthsea, even though it's a classic, and I highly recommend all of the books. Earthsea is a world made of mostly islands that are all kind of grouped together, and they're mostly populated by people of color. They're often described as copper or brown skinned. There are some black characters. And then far off to the east, there's an island called Karhide, which is the white barbaric invaders. That's where they come from. So one character that the book follows pretty closely is the wizard Ged, from his time as a small child learning magic to the archmage of all the islands. He's a really powerful wizard. In the book The Farthest Shore, Ged had a really monumentous life event happen where he went into death to try and stop this wizard who was draining the land of all its magic. And in stopping him, Ged lost all of his magic. He's not able to do magic anymore. And that book was finished in the 70s or 80s sometime. I should really know this. But anyway, Tehanu wasn't written until many years later, but it takes place only a few days after. In the second Earthsea book, The Tombs of Atuan, Ged rescues a young woman named Tanar. Now, in Tehanu, Tanar is one of the main characters. She's a widow, a woman in probably her mid-40s, and she's adopted a young woman named Theru, who has been horribly burned and abused, and Tanar rescued her and has been raising her as her daughter on her farm, and her husband's dead, so she's just been taking care of the farm herself with the help of a few neighbors. One of Ged's mentors was also Tanar's mentor. His name was Ogion, and he sends word to Tanar that he is dying, so Tanar and Theru go to his house to visit him and kind of help him through his last days. And when he dies, he tells Tanar his true name. And names are really important in Earthsea. The true name of things is how you command them, and most people are told their true name when they come of age, and they don't really reveal it to anyone. Now, when Ogion dies, 2 wizards that live locally come and try and say, like, oh, it's too bad that Ogion's true name didn't get revealed, and Tanar's like, well, he told me, and they're like, yeah, it's just too bad. She's like, dude, he told me his real name, and they just kind of, like, ignore her, don't really see her, kind of look down on her, and also she's the only white woman in, like, this whole island full of brown people, so she is just not respected at all, even though she's a fine woman. She did all these amazing things when she was younger, and they just don't respect her at all. So Theru and Tanar decide to stay at Ogion's house for a while, and they meet one of his neighbors, Auntie Moss, who is actually Ged's aunt, and she's sort of the village witch. And as she was portrayed in the first book, A Wizard of Earthsea, she doesn't know a lot of true magic, but she does herbalism and healing and stuff like that, and she really helps young Theru open up. Now, a few days into staying at Ogion's house, a dragon brings Ged to Tanar, and like I said, it's just a few days after the events of The Farthest Shore, so Ged is just totally drained and spent, and he's despairing that he's lost all of his magic. Now, remember, Ged is the archmage, but he's really ashamed that he doesn't have his magic, and he says, well, I can't be archmage anymore, and these people come and try to find him, and he turns them away because he's like, oh, poor me, I don't have my magic anymore, this was my whole life's work. Eventually, they all go back to Tanar's husband's farm, where Ged decides to be a goat herd, because that's how he was brought up, and he just tries to, like, re-find himself. Now, along the way, Tehanu realizes that Ged's magic was sort of preventing her from falling in love with him, and now that his magic is gone, they actually fall in love, and it's really sweet. So during the winter, the farm is attacked by the man who abused and probably fathered Theru, but Ged drives them off. I think he kills one with a pitchfork or something, and it's really badass, and Tehanu is, like, trying to defend the house, and Ged is, like, attacking them, and she's like, see, you do just fine without magic. The rest of us get along just fine without it. Tehanu has 2 children, which don't really have a lot of bearance on the story. There's a daughter who lives in a town, and then her son, a sailor, whom she hasn't seen in about 3 years, and he doesn't know that his father is dead and that the farm is now his, because, of course, it passes to the male heir, not his wife. But he won't do any work that he considers women's work, even though Tehanu has been used to Ged helping around the house, because wizards just do any kind of work when they're living in an all-male university. And she's like, oh, I didn't raise him right, I don't know what I'm gonna do, like, he doesn't like that, like, my boyfriend is living with me now, basically, and he's just, like, a really grumpy sailor man. So at one point, a messenger comes to the farm, and just like with Ogion, says, Auntie Moss is dying, you have to come back. So Tehanu, Ged, and Theru rush back to Moss, and she is dying, but it turns out she was cursed by the village wizards who visited Tehanu before when Ogion died, and they trap Ged and Tehanu because, you know, neither of them can do magic, and it's really shitty for a little bit, but then a dragon comes out of nowhere, well, not out of nowhere, to save them, and it turns out that Theru, whose true name is Tehanu, summoned the dragon, and that she herself, it's implied, can turn into a dragon. But Theru, or Tehanu, isn't quite ready to go fulfill her destiny yet, and so she, Ged, and Tehanu decide to abandon the farm and live in Ogion's house together. So that was just a brief plot summary, as brief as I could make it, and now I'll do some analysis of it. This is really a departure from the other Earthsea books, and not just because Tehanu is a main character, because she was also a main character of the Tombs of Atuan, but it's probably one of the most domestic and low-stakes books I've ever read, and it was wonderful. Like, if it didn't come across, I absolutely adored this book, and it just probably, like, changed the way I view fantasy, because so much of the other books are about magic and power, and this book is about that, but in, like, incredibly subtle and fundamental ways. It's not just about razzle-dazzle magic, and, like, magic in Earthsea isn't like that, but it really gets into what makes women's magic and women's power different from men's magic and men's power, and like I said, it is really a response to, like, both the second wave feminist movement and also Le Guin looking around her at her contemporaries and back on her own work and thinking, wow, I can really do better with female representation. And in A Wizard of Earthsea, Auntie Moss is seen as this, like, kind of deceptive, like, evil village witch woman. And there's this saying that is used unironically at first, which is, evil is women's magic. And that phrase gets brought up again in Tehanu, but Tehanu is kind of trying to analyze that and saying, like, well, why is women's magic evil? And, like, you know, what makes it different from men's magic? And this is exactly what Terry Pratchett does. And, you know, I know that Terry Pratchett was a straight white guy, but I really believe, like, one of my most firm beliefs that I'll ever have is that he gets it. Well, got it. He's dead now. But, like, he could write female characters like pretty much no one else. Even, like, his female contemporaries, like Andre Norton and even Ursula Le Guin, couldn't write women as well as he could, and I think that's just because he had such a good understanding of, like, everyone. Like, he could write about, like, any situation or any job, and he would just, like, fundamentally understand, like, why those people act the way they do, and he, like, not in his first 2 books, but, like, in the 3rd book, and then in the later Witches, and, like, just, like, his other books in Discworld, like, he got women. Just, like, he's just such a fucking incredible writer, and I firmly believe that he had a big influence on Tehanu and the female characters that Ursula Le Guin would later write. Now, I don't think that it's an entirely up to him. Of course, Ursula Le Guin is already an amazing writer, and she already wrote some other good female characters, like, especially in Tombs of Atuan, that Tanar is the main character in that one too, but the witches in Pratchett's books are all about, like, responsibility to your community, and, like, not just flashy magic, but doing what needs to be done, and doing the job that's in front of you, and going around the village and making sure that everyone's taken care of in, like, really unglamorous ways. And that is, like, what women entirely do, is, like, they don't get recognition, and they just do what needs to be done, most of them throughout most of history. And there is, like, small magic in that, and, like, magic in responsibility. And I think, like, a good third of this book is just, like, conversations between people talking about that, like, conversations between Tanar and Auntie Moss, and, like, between Tanar and Ged, just talking about, like, why is women's magic different from men's magic, and, like, why are women different from men, because, science proves that our brains are pretty much the same, but how we're socialized is, like, completely different. And this sparked something in my reading habits where I started to look for more domestic fantasy, and I think The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden does this really well. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is, like, a super low stakes sci-fi book, and I don't think a book needs big flashy battles and set pieces in order to be a good book. I like things to happen in books, but I think that emotional arcs can be just as or more important than plot arcs. I'd like to briefly talk about the ending of Tehanu, where Theru summons a dragon to save Ged and Tanar. Now, some people have seen this as a deus ex machina, but I disagree, because the book is named Tehanu after Theru's true name. Like, it's not named Tanar, and Theru isn't a point of view character until, like, the very end, I think, but it's her, like, realizing that she is, like, a dragon person, and her ability that calls forth a dragon that saves her, guardians. And that's, in young adult, a lot of the point of young adult is that your guardians and adults around you aren't always going to be there to save you, and aren't always going to be there to take care of you, and you need to have the self-actualization in order to save yourself. And in a lot of YA, this manifests as parents and adults being, like, negligent, or just, like, abusive, or just, like, bad at what they do, and I really don't like that, series of unfortunate events. But in this book, it's when, like, the chips are down, Ged and Tanar can't help themselves because neither of them have magic, like, Theru comes and saves them with, like, her own power that she didn't realize she had before. And I think that's, like, really incredible. She's, like, a young, like, abuse survivor who's, like, half her body is burned, but she is this, like, incredible force. Now, I'm pretty sure she becomes the Archmage at some point, although I haven't read Tales from Earthsea, so I don't know yet, but I will get back to you on that. And other people can confirm that for me if they've read the whole Earthsea cycle, which I have not yet. I'm working on it. So, if this is indeed her book, then I think it's the perfect ending. Now, because I have so much praise, I think that I have less to talk about, so I'm gonna try and wrap this video up within the next few minutes. I, don't have gripes about it. Like, this channel isn't to, like, complain about bad books. It's about exploring all forms of different books, and exploring that, women can be allowed to write mediocre books. So, in summary, nothing happens in this book, and that is great. And I love this book. It's on, I think I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. It's going to be one of my top books I read this year, and I'm just feel really glad to have read it, and just to keep going down the list of all the Ursula Le Guin books I'm making my way through. Alright, thank you so much for watching. Next, I'm going to be reading Green Rider by Kirsten Britton, and I'm pretty excited because I think it's going to be a lot like the Heralds of Valdemar book, and so I'll be excited to see how that one turns out, so hopefully I will get that done within the next few days. Alright, bye!